Hello and welcome. My name's Chris Terrell, and I'm going to go through the equipment that I take with me and how I pack this into a skin-on-frame sea kayak. It's one of the Cape Falcon Kayak's F1 designs. What I've laid out here is the stuff that's going to go into a series of bags and then into bigger bags inside the forward and the rear sections of the kayak. Then I'll talk about the contents of another pair of bags which also come into the kayak with me. I use a numbered bag system for all the smaller bags here. To remind me, I've got a kit list and a packing guide, and also I've made diagrams of how I like to pack things in the kayak, what goes where. And I find that just helps me to keep things organized, it keeps things drier, and it's also good for adjusting the trim of the boat, the distribution of weight fore and aft in the kayak. I've made this available as a download in exchange for Buy Me a Coffee through the link in the description below. So if you think this would be useful, you just have to follow that link, and that will also help support this channel, which would be really helpful. Thank you. I got a lot of ideas for this from a combination of systems used by Roddy McDowell and by Brian Schultz of Cape Falcon Kayaks. And again, in the description, I'll put links to their videos on this if you want to check those out too. First of all, I've got my shelter. I've got a tent here, and I've got a 3/4 length sleeping mat and a lightweight sleeping bag. And I like to use a lightweight bag partly because it's more compact, it's much easier to squash down. It also means that if I do need extra warmth, I just wear some of the other clothing that I brought with me, which you'll see shortly. And that goes into one of these dry bags here. It's a bit of a tight fit, but it helps to make sure that this all stays dry, even though it's inside another dry bag when I eventually pack it. I may well also use a very lightweight sleeping bag liner, preferably a silk one. That can just pack down, and I just squeeze as much air out of these as I can before I actually pack them. And now that's ready to put into the kayak. These other things, I don't actually put these into a waterproof bag because I've got a cloth that I can always wipe things down with. Now the tent, this is a very lightweight one-person tent. It's a little pod type of thing, which I found very useful. It has a single pole. And what I usually do before I pack this in the kayak, rather than keep it in one, to distribute the weight, take the fly sheet and the inner part of the tent, separate them from the poles and pegs, and then I can put them in different positions in the kayak so that it just spreads things out a bit. And it means that I can actually crunch up the tent itself nice and tight so it fits in. I usually also bring a microfiber cloth with me because that's good for cleaning the tent and also drying up any things if I don't want it completely soaking wet inside the kayak. These things here are extras for this particular trip. We're going into the Knoydart Peninsula on the west coast of Scotland, which is quite remote, and we're hoping to climb at least one of the mountains there because it's a great opportunity. Over here I've got various accessories for doing some video. So I've got a camera, extra power pack batteries, some waterproof casings for my phone and so on, and a little bit of sketching stuff as well because I want to try and do a few watercolor sketches while I'm out there. Cooking, then I've got the Trangia stove. I usually put that inside a plastic bag. This flask is standing in for my fuel bottle. I've got a litre-sized SIG bottle for putting the methylated spirits in, which is the fuel for the Trangia. And I will, later on I'll show you how I stow that in the kayak in case of any leaks. This yellow bag is standing in for the food that I'm going to bring with me for 2 to 3 days. And as we're doing a 3-day trip, then I'll go through the food that I take and the menu planning I do for that in a separate video. In this bag, I'll be putting a pair of very lightweight waterproofs, these kind of things that pack right down. This is the little waterproof jacket and a pair of trousers. These are the kinds of things which I found it's useful to have on a campsite for just walking around generally. It gives you something that's windproof as well, and that isn't as awkward to get on and off as your standard paddling, pagool, or that kind of thing. So it's just a little bit easier to wear and doesn't take up much room. Also, if I find I have to walk out, it's a little bit more comfortable for walking in. In addition, I've got plenty of midge juice. So this is the Smidge brand. I usually try to put it in a plastic bag because the cap on these Smidge bottles tends to come off quite easily. And if it does that inside your bag, this can get squeezed and you end up with all this foamy stuff around the inside of your bag where you don't really want it. I've also got a little midge net, which I can wear when I'm in camp or when I'm stopping for lunch at a place. If you pull in at an island or a little bay, sometimes the midges can come out and be a right pain. But they're mostly a problem in the morning and in the early evening as well. So that's really the time when it's useful to have an extra head net with you. In this bag, this is more the hygiene bag. So I've got things like, again, midge juice, midge net, a little bit of toothpaste. If you can get hold of one of these little tiny traveling ones, then this is really handy. I'll also put a toothbrush in. Bit of sun cream. This is a nice practical size bottle. So again, when this empties out, I'll just refill it from another one. But it's useful to bring that as well. Spare reading glasses, just because I'm getting to that age. Tissues for comfort, and you can use them as toilet paper. A few extra bits of string for repairs and for holding glasses on, either for myself or for other people in the group. And I also like to bring a few little dog poo bags. These are really handy for all sorts of things. They are useful if you have to go to the toilet in places where you can't really bury it. Pick it up, same as you do for a dog, put it in these, and if you've got a canister to put it into, you can take it safely back out. I've also got a little device for removing ticks. They're becoming an increasing problem in Scotland, and they can carry quite a nasty disease with them called Lyme disease. So it's important that if you find any ticks that have latched onto you, that you remove them soon, but also that you remove them effectively. Have a look online for tick removers. If I can, I'll put some links in the description again, but where you can find some of these. But that's becoming an essential part of a first aid kit these days. And if you've got it readily available, you can quickly and easily remove them from yourself or from others in your group. And if you've got children with you, for example, then it's important to get them off. This is my more emergency change of clothing for wearing in the tent if I've got wet during the day. So I've got a pair of thermal long johns, like leggings, a thermal top. So it's all lightweight and condenses right down. Spare pair of pants, spare pair of socks, and a pair of thermal gloves, and a little lightweight thermal balaclava as well. So my aim with this is to have a very compact but a very effectively warm, lightweight clothing that I can quickly put on in the tent or in a bivvy bag, whatever, if there's a problem. And I'm straight away into warm clothing that if I keep it dry, that will do me really well. Then as outer layers in the next bag, I've got a lightweight fleece and a spare pair of lightweight mountain trousers, similar to what I'll probably be wearing if I'm paddling, if it's in reasonably warm conditions. A spare woolly hat, really important piece of kit to keep your head warm because you lose a lot of heat through your head. And also, for me, a spare pair of glasses. They're not my best ones, a pair of older glasses with some retaining straps, but it just means I've got a backup in case my other ones get damaged or I lose them. Moving across to here then, I've got this little sandwich box. That's just a useful general box for putting things that need to be kept reasonably dry and physically protected from compression. I don't always bring this on a shorter trip, but sometimes on a longer trip I will. It's additional repair kit for the kayak. Because it's a skin-on-frame kayak, I've got essentially sail-making gear. So I've got a sailmaker's palm, some sail-making needles, some additional artificial sinew, and nylon string as well in there. If there was a problem, I could actually do some stitching repairs to help patch up any problems in the kayak. Because I do carry an additional emergency repair kit for the kayak in one of the other bags, which I'll show you later. Alternative paddling clothing to wear if it turns out to be quite hot and summery. If you get a really warm day, it's nice to be able to change into some lighter stuff to paddle in, because otherwise it can just become really overheating and you can start to really dehydrate. So I've got a couple of extra lightweight hats to keep the sun off, a little bandana, spare pair of sunglasses and a whistle. And then to wear on my legs, I've got a pair of lightweight Ron Hills there, a pair of trunks in case I'm swimming in a public place and need to avoid offending people. And then here we've got a thermal top. I usually find that's quite good if it's quite a hot day. If it's hot but I'm getting sprayed with water, then I'll probably wear a cag on top of that. But then just that thermal underneath gives me a bit of warmth without overheating. This is just a really nice extra thing to have in camp. Very lightweight down jackets, and it compresses right down, but it's very, very warm as well. So a really useful piece of extra comfort kit, and that squeezes down into another bag. And again, a very useful piece of kit if it turns out to be a really cold night. I can wear it inside the small sleeping bag. It will give me a lot of extra warmth. A little traveling towel, again on a longer trip, it's just useful for drying off. It's one of these microfiber cloths, so you could get away with just a regular cleaning microfiber cloth, and that plus a bit of wind will actually dry you off pretty well. And a pair of lightweight beach shoes. They're very flexible, they'll roll up, they'll squeeze into small spaces, but I try to keep them dry if I can, because then it's just more comfortable back in the camp. And that just protects your feet, but allows them to air a bit when you're walking around the campsite. They're very cheap to buy at beach shops, and they're very easy to look after, and they squeeze into any place. On this trip, because we're going into the Knoydart Peninsula, there's an opportunity to go up one of the more remote mountains there, so I'm bringing a little bit of hill walking gear with me. So this old pair of boots, they're a bit more lightweight, so I can squash them down. If they get trashed in the trip, it doesn't really matter too much. A pair of waterproof trousers for the mountains, which are easy to fit on over these boots. A pair of gaiters, again, they roll up nice and tight, but they're really good for keeping just general rubbish like heather, twigs, and maybe also ticks out of my boots. Walking socks, another woolly hat, and I'm also bringing with me an additional waterproof here. This is just a cape. It's like a sort of poncho type of thing, very lightweight, but actually very useful, and also a potential emergency shelter in itself. Compass, whistle, I'll have maps, which I'm laminating up, which I'll also bring along. I won't be bringing a regular rucksack on this trip, but what I will bring is this slightly larger dry bag. I'll probably attach a second strap off one of the other bags to this to give me two straps, so it's more like a rucksack. It's about the same capacity as a summer day sack, and it has the advantage I can roll the whole thing up. Packing these in might be a bit of a challenge because things are pretty tight, but these boots at least will be pretty essential on this trip, I think. These two bags here are ones which I have much more easily to hand inside the kayak. This one I usually try to keep behind me, behind where I sit if possible. And this one usually ends up, if I'm fully laden, then it usually ends up between my knees, which is not ideal, but the cockpit's big enough to allow an easy exit even with this bag, even if it did get a bit stuck between my knees. And this is really my grab bag, which has real emergency stuff. If I lost contact with the kayak or got ashore and somehow lost the kayak, this is my backup emergency bag. So I'll go through this one first. Spare pair of gloves here, another spare woolly hat, paracord, just useful for all sorts of things. This is it's a sheet of Pertex. It was supposed to be some travel towels, but I didn't find they were that effective. But it is a useful additional piece of windproof cloth to have, very lightweight, and it can act as like a bandana, sunshade or whatever. So that all packs in there. In the other bag, I've got one of the Buffalo belay jackets. This is a very old one now, but it's done me really well. I've also got the hood attached to it, which is a wonderful warm thing. I try to roll this up as tight as I can. This is really my emergency and quick access warm clothing. The advantage of the belay jacket is you can wear it over the top of relatively bulky other clothing as well. I just like to label my bags as well so that it reminds me what's meant to be in each one. And on this one, as it's an emergency bag, I've just tied this extra bit of high-vis cloth on it, just as another marker. I'll have with me a spare compass and a little one of these little flat magnifying glasses. Again, spare bits of paracord, bits of string to hold glasses on, a head torch, another torch, quite a nice bright one, spare batteries for the head torch, and in this little canister I've got some cotton wool and one of these sparkers for lighting a fire. So anything with batteries I double wrap. So I'll put those inside 2 bags, and then they go inside the outer bag. So there's a really, it would have to be in the water for quite a long time for any water to get through to the batteries. So that sits nicely between my knees. I try not to add too many extras to that. So I might put a snack in there, a little snack bar. I might put some money, maybe my phone inside here as well. But that's about it. I already carry a knife on me when I'm paddling, so that's well taken care of. Over here is just one of these big Ortlieb water bags. And again, depending on where I'm going, if I think I'm going to need extra water, then I can not completely fill this up, but partially fill it. And the thing I like about this is it's got these 2 clips and straps at each end. If I use this as ballast, just behind where I sit, I can actually clip these around the ribs so that it doesn't move around, and in the event of a capsize wouldn't completely upset the stability, but I hope would actually help me to roll up. But it does give a good extra water supply. And on the campsite, if I find a good water supply, then I can fill this up, and it saves me doing lots of trips back and forth. I usually bring a flask with me as well. This is quite a small one, but it just gives me an immediate hot drink for myself or other people as well. And these Stanley flasks I find to be a good quality make. This other bag then is the one that tends to go behind me, so I may well just put ordinary first aid stuff, first aid for the boat and first aid for me or other people. So again, this is a smaller first aid kit which I'll take on maybe day trips. For this longer trip, I'm probably going to take my full mountain first aid kit because it's got extra things in it, which may come in useful. And that will include an extra support bandage in case myself or anybody else gets some kind of problem with strain on the journey. This is a pair of paddling gloves made by Lomo. I find they're quite good. I get a little cold in them, but they give a bit of extra protection. So these things can all go in here. And this is the bag in which I'll also put my lunch and any other things which need to be kept dry but need to be to hand. So again, I'll maybe sometimes put a spare hat inside this lot. And then this packs down and can squeeze into the boat behind where I sit.